Introduction. The term agriculture comes from Latin words ager and culture, meaning soil and cultivation, respectively. Agriculture or farming is one of the oldest occupational practices known to humankind. The journey of raw material to finished product involves three stages of economic activities: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Today, agriculture is the most fundamental economic activity which meets almost 90% of our food and beverage requirements, bulk of our clothing fiber, and large amounts of raw material required for different industries. It primarily includes the cultivation of crops and rearing of cattle. We shall also develop an understanding of different types of farming practiced in the world. Agriculture is practiced in over 49% of the land surface of the earth, employing over half of the world's population. Key factors of agricultural growth. Climate. Climate is the dominant factor that influences agriculture. Plants thrive best under certain temperature conditions, which also determine their growth period. The annual and seasonal distribution of rainfall determines the available water supply to plants and the active growth period of crops. Soil. Soils determine the type of crops that can be grown in any region. Most crops require specific soil characteristics, relief and drainage. The agricultural regions are located largely in the plains. Rugged relief hinders farming. A good drainage system means a supply of river water that favors irrigation. Human factor, social, economic, and political factors all play an important role in influencing the type of agriculture practiced and even the crops and animals that are grown and raised. The agricultural activity is primarily concentrated in those regions where the key factors for suitable agricultural growth exist. Sedentary primitive subsistence agriculture. In this type of farming practice, same fields are cultivated again and again after a period of fallowing, and the farming community stays permanently in one place. Farmers do a more careful job of preparing the land and cultivating the crops. Sedentary farmers are those who stay and practice agriculture in one place. They often sell their surplus products to nearby villages. Organic fertilizers, especially animal manure and night soil or human waste, are used to increase the fertility of the soil. Regular supply of water is required for irrigation in order to grow crops all through the year. Crops include cereals like maize, sorghum, wheat and barley, as well as cassava, yam, potatoes, fruits and vegetables. Crop rotation is practiced to increase soil fertility. For instance, leguminous crops like beans add nitrogen to the soil. Such crops increase soil fertility and are therefore used in rotation with other crops. Methods of tillage are more intensive and more manpower is used. Crude implements and animal-drawn plows are common. Animals like buffaloes, pigs and cows are kept as draught animals for farm work and to provide milk and meat. This type of agriculture can sustain a larger population on a permanent basis. Shifting cultivation. Slash and burn agriculture or shifting agriculture is practiced mainly by tribal people. This practice is one of the oldest forms of migratory agriculture. After 2 or 3 years of producing vegetable and grain crops on a recently cleared piece of land, the migrants abandon it for another newly cleared plot. Each time a spot of virgin forest is selected as it is more productive. Trees and bushes are cleared by slashing and the remaining vegetation is burnt. The ashes add potash to the soil. Then the seeds are sown after the rains. Plots are small, scattered patches of tilled land surrounded by broad stretches of forest and grassland. Crops cultivated include manioc, yam, millet, maize, as well as taros, peanuts, cucumbers, tomatoes, and bananas. 2 to 4 different crops are often grown alongside each other. As they ripen at different times, a food supply is always available. Family members do all the work using crude farming methods and implements like sticks, hoes, picks, and machetes. Farmers supplement their food supply by hunting, food gathering, and fishing. Some keep a few poultry and goats. Once soil fertility decreases, the fields are abandoned to soil erosion and the farmers move on. Consequently, they build only temporary shelters. The produce is for family consumption. Any surplus is sold or exchanged within the village community itself. Therefore, it is a type of subsistence agriculture only. In fact, many shifting cultivators are changing to sedentary subsistence agriculture. Extensive commercial grain farming. What were once the temperate grasslands are today the granaries of the world. Today, the prairie and the steppe lands are used to cultivate grain, especially wheat, on a very large scale, the bulk of which is for world trade. In contrast to intensive agriculture in the tropics, extensive commercial grain farming is characteristic of those parts of the world where population is relatively low and fertile land is available in plenty. Farms are therefore very large, ranging from 250 to 15,000 hectares. As the farms are large, almost all work is highly mechanized and scientifically managed. Little human labor is employed per farm. All work beginning from plowing to harvesting is done by machines. Tractors, levelers, seed drills, and combine harvesters that reap, thresh, winnow, and sack the grain are in use. This type of agriculture is therefore capital intensive. Wheat is the main crop and is of two varieties, spring and winter wheat. It is this crop specialization that allows a large surplus for commercial trade. Sometimes oil seeds like flax and soybeans are grown in rotation in the off-season after the main wheat crop to enhance soil fertility. Barley, oats, rye, and corn may be grown along with sugar beet and vegetables. Close attention is given to plant selection and pesticide use to tackle pests and diseases. Chemical fertilizers are also used in large quantities to ensure good yields. Yields may be low per hectare, but yields per farm are very high because of the large size of the farms. Consequently, a large surplus is available for export. All the produce is stored in large silos or storage bins before being packed and shipped out. In the temperate lands, monoculture or concentrating on the cultivation of one crop allows crop specialization and therefore very high yields. Intensive subsistence agriculture. In regions where there are large populations to be supported on small farms, agriculture has to be intensive. Though it may be for subsistence, a large part of the produce also enters national trade. Farming is practiced on every available piece of land to support the dense population. Such intensive tillage generates high yields from every square foot of land. Farms are as small as 0.3 acres in Japan, 1 acre in India, and 2 acres in China. Rice is the main crop except in low rainfall areas. Intensive agriculture means farmers practice multiple cropping, where 2 or more crops are grown each year. For example, rice with wheat, barley or maize, or sometimes even 3 crops of rice. Often crop rotation with vegetables, oilseeds, fruits and even sugarcane is practiced. This returns fertility to the soil and balances water shortages in the dry months. In areas where fields are small, unskilled labor is required for tilling, sowing and harvesting. Where fields are larger, tractors and plows are used along with threshers, hullers and sprayers. In fact, in Japan, where fields are small, special tractors have been made to work on these small fields. In order to ensure high yields and continued fertility, farmers use plenty of organic as well as chemical fertilizers. Though annual flooding of the soil by rain is helpful, farmers use various means of irrigation to grow crops in the dry season. In a farming practice called interculture, mixed rows of crops are sown to assure food supply all year round. Yields per acre are the highest in the world, but yields per man are not as high as individuals own small farms. The surplus produced is sold to nearby towns and cities. Some surplus is also exported. Water bodies yield an additional supply of food locally. Fish culture or aquaculture, fish, water lily, duckweed, lotus and water caltrop that grow in these water bodies are consumed by the farmers. Most farmers rear a small number of poultry, pigs, goats and cattle for milk and meat. Market gardening and horticulture. Many areas in most countries of the world specialize in the cultivation of vegetables, fruits and flowers for urban markets. Market gardens are usually located outside towns and cities, where soil and climate are favorable and land is available. As most of the produce is perishable, it must reach the markets quickly before it spoils. Therefore, besides a market, this form of agriculture also requires an efficient transport system for quick movement of the produce. Refrigerated trucks with storage facilities are often used. Mixed farming. In many parts of the temperate grasslands where rainfall is low, livestock ranching sometimes becomes more important than the cultivation of crops. Both the activities are carried on side by side, and so this type of farming is called mixed farming. Large numbers of one type of livestock are raised on huge ranches for their milk, meat and wool. 4/5 of the total livestock are raised for meat. Good strains and improved breeds of cattle, sheep, hogs, poultry and horses are reared on natural pastures and stored fodder. Other than horses, their produce is sold in national and international markets. On the ranch, there are residential quarters for the farmers, bank houses for cowboys, corrals and feeding pens for the animals and sheds for keeping equipment. A variety of crops are grown under mixed farming. Corn predominates, along with wheat, oats, soybeans and fodder crops like hay, clover, timothy, grass and alfalfa. Vegetables and root crops like sugar beet and potatoes are also grown. Farms vary in size from about 80 acres in Europe to over 300 acres in the US and Canada. The crops produce high yields to feed the farmers and the livestock. A large amount of the crop is also sold commercially. Skilled help is hired during planting and harvesting and for the care of the livestock. Most crop work is mechanized. Nomadic herding. Some animal herders move from one place to another in search of forage and water for their animals. Today many of them are becoming sedentary. Transhumance is a practice where animals migrate seasonally along well-defined traditional routes in the care of a limited number of herdsmen. The amount of grass and water determine how long they stay in a place as well as the direction of their movement. Animals are reared for their milk, meat and skin, and even as beasts of burden. Depending on the climate and the terrain, nomads rear cattle, sheep, goats, reindeer, camels and yaks. The animals feed on natural vegetation and grasses in the warmer months and return with the herders to the permanent villages in winter. The animal produce is for local consumption. These nomadic communities often exchange any surplus for agricultural and manufactured goods. However, many groups are becoming sedentary now. So far we have been studying subsistence agricultural activity that does not contribute much to international trade. The output is mostly for local requirement with little surplus for trade. In the following section, we shall discuss types of commercial agriculture which produce a large surplus that is mostly exported. Plantation agriculture. Plantation agriculture can be defined as the growing and processing of a single cash crop on a very large scale, mostly for the purpose of export. In each plantation, the crop is chosen according to the prevailing physical conditions. This large-scale, specialized monoculture concentrates on the cultivation of a commercial cash crop like tea, coffee, rubber, oil palm, cotton or cocoa. Fruits like pineapples or bananas are also grown. Large estates, often more than 100 acres each, are needed to generate large yields for export. Due to the nature of the crops, little mechanization can be used on the plantations. So, skilled labor in large number is required for all stages of cropping. These are usually recruited from the local population. All work from plowing to processing of the crop is organized on an extremely efficient and scientific basis. The entire activity requires careful monitoring. Most plantation crops take 3 to 6 years to mature and require replanting after a period of production. Large doses of fertilizers to ensure a good yield and pesticides to protect the crop are required. Plantation farming is therefore extremely capital intensive. Modern machinery is utilized to process the crop on the plantation itself. The finished product is then traded both nationally and internationally. Variable environmental conditions have therefore led to variations in agricultural patterns and processes. These keep changing with time and in response to changing human needs. Dairy farming. Commercial dairy farming involves the raising of animals primarily for their milk and milk products like cream, butter, condensed milk, and cheese. Dairy farming is practiced on large commercial dairy farms in temperate lands to meet the large international demand for dairy products. Near large cities and towns to meet their requirements as seen in the tropics and subtropics. Mulch cattle of the best breeds are kept in green meadows and fed on stored fodder. These supply fresh milk all through the year. This milk is scientifically processed into a range of dairy products that are sold commercially. Modern scientific methods of breeding ensure high-quality products. Animal and fodder storage sheds are constructed on the farms. Expensive equipment like milking machines, feeding towers, and troughs are used. Dairy farming is practiced around urban and industrial centers all over the world. Following the White Revolution, a major development has come about in the production of milk and milk products, due to which our country has become one of the largest milk producers and exporters in the world.